What is being revealed, in my opinion, is that the world of global public health in general, is run like a mafia. The first thing that led me to what I'm going to cover today was this. I don't know if you caught this thing. It was a 2.5-hour long telethon sort of thing. This pledging event, they called it, hosted by Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU. Over the course of this 2.5 hours, they had a whole string of world leaders that sounded like they were reading hostage notes, that they were given a script and they had to read this thing to the camera and give up, in the end, $8 billion of taxpayer money, all told from all of their citizens. So you and I are paying for this thing. Just listen to a select few world leaders and what it sounded like to listen to them.
Better diagnostics, treatments, and a safe and effective vaccine.
COVID-19 diagnostics, therapeutics and vaccines.
Largement du développement et du déploiement rapide de diagnostics, vaccins et traitements efficaces.
Universal access to vaccination, treatment and diagnostics.
Equitable access to new COVID diagnostics, therapeutics and vaccine.
We must all work together on improving diagnostics, accelerating therapies, and ultimately developing a vaccine.
We need to make vaccines, treatment, and diagnostics accessible to everyone.
Vaccines, treatments, and diagnosis will be the most effective way to do it.
We need new diagnostics, vaccines, treatments, and an equal distribution to all.
On equitable access to diagnostics, treatments, and vaccines.
And affordability of the vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics
in order to develop adequate treatments and vaccine.
But the interesting thing about this pledging event was that in addition to the world leaders, Ursula von der Leyen also had on testimonials from the people who are going to be benefiting from this. And here's Ursula von der Leyen, just really quickly, introducing each one of them so you get to familiarize yourselves with the names of the organizations.
For the World Health Organization, Director General Dr. Tedros. The World Bank, the World Economic Forum, the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Gavi, the Vaccines Alliance, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, CEPI. Without you, Victor, my friend, all this would not have happened.
Victor Zhao. Victor Zhao, who they said was president of the National Academy of Medicine and a board member of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. So I thought it's worth a look into Victor Zhao's background. So that's what we're going to start with. Victor Zhao, first of all, he was born in China and that his father owned a chemical manufacturing company. But listen to just some of the things Victor Zhao does and did. President of the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, serves as vice chair of the U.S. National Research Council. He's Chancellor Emeritus and James B. Duke Professor of Medicine at Duke. He was also Chairman of Medicine at Harvard, as well as Chairman of Medicine at Stanford U. And he served on the Board of Health Governors of the World Economic Forum and chaired its global agenda. He was also on the advisory committee to the NIH director. And that's significant because Anthony Fauci at the NIAID is in the National Institute of Health as well. And there's so much more that isn't listed in that 2018 biography that I just showed you. I mean, just for your reference and records, here is a graphic. The National Academy of Medicine is actually a 501c3 organization, a foundation, and it's funded by other foundations. Here is how the National Academy of Medicine gets its funding now. From these foundations. Of note, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, the Rockefeller Foundation, the U.S. State Department through the USAID, and the World Economic Forum, you will notice, is part of the oversight group. Some of these double up. The Wellcome Trust is part of the oversight group. The Rockefeller is part of the oversight group. All right, the other thing that they said that he was part of is this GPMB, Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. It turns out you don't even need to look hard. The GPMB is the World Health Organization and World Bank. You can see it's co-convened in May 2018 by the World Bank Group and the World Health Organization. The funders of the GPMB are the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, Germany, and this NGO called Resolve to Save Lives, which is run by a guy called Tom Frieden, who is the former head of the CDC and the former New York Health Commissioner. He also worked on Bloomberg Philanthropies. The World Health Organization and the World Bank created this seemingly independent body called the GPMB. And then the GPMB puts out a call for reports. And they ask Johns Hopkins, Chatham House, Wellcome, International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, and the World Bank and the World Health Organization to write these reports. And then this organization aggregates the results of these reports and makes another report in which it recommends increasing funding to all the people who fund the GPMB and the World Bank and the World Health Organization. Gavi and the Global Fund, those are Bill and Melinda Gates efforts. And the IDA, well, I noticed that it had a very similar logo to the World Bank. And of course, that's because it is part of the World Bank. Another little interesting bit from this report commissioned by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board. It says that their progress indicators by September 2020 would include the United Nations, including the World Health Organization, conducting at least 2 system-wide training and simulation exercises, including one covering the deliberate release of a lethal respiratory pathogen. Boom. Is this all fake? Is this a system-wide training and simulation exercise by the WHO and the United Nations? Is that what this is? And if it is, are we in for another one? Because they said they want at least 2. Now remember, this all started because I was looking at this coronavirus global pledging event, and I wanted to know more about Dr. Victor Zhao. We already know quite a bit about him, but there's more you don't know. He also is on the board of this organization called Research America. And in this organization's website, I found a celebration of this CEPI organization. Connecting Curiosity to Cures, CEPI hopes to eradicate epidemics. This was written in February 2017. And we look down here, and sure enough, it's founded by the Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, World Economic Forum, and the governments of Norway and India, it says. CEPI is currently led by an interim board made up of internationally renowned experts in the fields of public health, vaccine development, and infectious diseases, including Research America board member and president of the National Academy of Medicine, Dr. Victor Zhao. Okay, so the article in Research America left a few people and organizations out. Namely, they didn't at all mention a couple of the other countries involved, and they didn't mention that it was co-founded by a handful of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, did they?
I am delighted to welcome you to this conversation about the work of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, which is, I have to say, one of the more extraordinary initiatives to come out of Davos recently. It was born out of a conversation a year ago. It's a concrete initiative between governments, foundations, and the private sector. Governments of Norway, Germany, Japan, and India. 2 of the biggest foundations in the world, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust Foundation. Strong support from the world's 6 biggest pharmaceutical companies, GSK, Merck, Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, Takeda, and Pfizer.
And these things work together. They push for vaccines, and in the meantime, they're investing in vaccine companies with their trust. And all of these guys are doing the same thing. Okay. They set all of this up. They set this up as the repository for where they were going to demand we send the money to, right? The World Economic Forum mafia, basically. The Davos set. That's them again. And then they make this whole sham, pretending there's a whole bunch of different organizations involved, but really it's all just them again, to write reports, which then produces a pandemic planning event where all they really focus on is controlling the message and getting finance. I wanted to have a closer look at one of those reports. So I opened up to the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and it dawned on me, Johns Hopkins is the organization who put on Event 201. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic planning exercise on October 18th, 2019. What? And wait a second. This report from the GPMB came out in September 2019. And October, they held the pandemic planning exercise. Now remember I told you it's good to remember Tim Evans was thanked particularly by the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board he used to work at the World Bank? Okay, there's Tim right there. Tim also appeared at Event 201. We're not going to get into his background right now. What I want to do instead is play you a clip of Tim speaking as a panelist at the Event 201.
Everybody gets excited around a table like this in the moment, and then you move on, and it's back to business as usual. And it's this panicked and neglect problem that we have, which is very difficult to prospectively develop real preparedness. So I think there should be somewhere, maybe it's out of the GPMB, and a number of people here are the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board.
The GPMB is the World Health Organization and World Bank. When the public hears it, they're not going to think, oh, that's the World Health Organization again? That's the World Bank again? It's a front organization.
There should be a time-bound plan with very clear targets with respect to what would constitute a new level of global preparedness. And we should look at what's required to get that financed, but that it has some real accountability to agents that lie behind or are advocating for stronger global governance.
What was his main point? We need to get that financed. He said. He laments the fact that they do these planning things, but because there's never pandemics, people don't tend to follow through on their funding. So they need something that's going to get this financed for once, he says, right? In October 2019, Tim Evans of the World Bank, that was his main concern. Then what happens? Boom! A real coronavirus pandemic happens. Really? Incredible. It's basically like protection money racket. When the mafia comes swinging into town and they go into the new, they go into the pizza parlor and they say, there's a problem around here with your windows getting smashed out. We can help you with that. We can make sure your windows don't get smashed out. And the person says, the pizza parlor owner says, there's no problem. I've never seen anybody's windows get smashed out. And that night after he locks up, sure enough, his windows get smashed out. And now he wishes he had have paid the protection money, right? So this allows them to now say, well, country leaders, we tried to warn you. We tried to get you to pay up before, but now look what's happened. Now everybody's dying in all the hospitals. Now our economies are going in the toilet. Please give us the money now, or it's just going to get worse. And you saw that Bill and Melinda Gates were sponsors of that project, Event 201, and all the reports that went into it. This writer on May 2nd wonders why Bill Gates is denying Event 201. Now, it's not like Bill Gates was asked about Event 201 and then said, no, I know nothing about this, it never happened. But what he did say was, on April 12th, 2020, Bill Gates said in an interview to the BBC, quote, Now here we are. We didn't simulate this. We didn't practice. So both the health policies and economic policies, we find ourselves in uncharted territory. Event 201 was very extensive, and it focused very much on economics, financing. But what it really focused on was controlling the message. It wanted to flood the zone with their own propaganda.
A couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy.
And flooding good information.
Flood the zone.
Flood.
A manifestation of flood.
Flood good information.
Flood the zone.
And what have we seen? We've seen nonstop coronavirus messaging everywhere. They're also censoring anything that goes counter or exposes them. For example, my video on Event 201 that I did months ago, which got almost 400,000 views, ixnay. They're also trying really hard to censor Judy Mikovits's anything she does. They try to censor it because she's exposing Dr. Anthony Fauci for the fraud that he is. Now, why would Bill Gates want to deny Event 201? Well, maybe because if you look at it, you'll see that the guy from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, there he is right there. You want to look at the Event 201 players? Christopher Elias, along with Timothy Evans and many others. Chris Elias, he is the face of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I thought to myself, while I'm looking at board members, let's look at the board members of the GPMB, the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, who we now know was involved in the background setup of Event 201. Let's look at the board. Well, there's Victor Zhao, there's Chris Elias again, and there's Jeremy Farrar. Hang on. There's Jeremy Farrar. Wow, I'm starting to see a massive pattern emerge, aren't you? And this guy, George Gao, he was also at the Event 201 as one of the players. And he is from China's CDC, China's Center for Disease Control. But you notice, I blacked one of the people out. I redacted them. And that's because I want you to have been fully prepared for the boom. Are you ready? Who lies behind the redaction? Anthony Fauci. Anthony Fauci, the guy leading the coronavirus task force. You guys all already know who he is, but there he is on the board of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, who was responsible for commissioning all of those reports, all of the reports that gets funding from these guys over here, which made its own report that eventually translated to Event 201. There he is there with all the usual suspects. Boom. There's just too many arrows necessary. Here's the shape of it. You can see how many times these faces repeat. The list of who benefits is the same list as the people setting policy and the people pressuring governments to pledge our taxpayer money for their plandemic. Just in case you weren't aware, Anthony Fauci gave an interesting speech at Georgetown University shortly after Trump was inaugurated, and here's what he had to say.
I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And
He had no doubt that there would be a surprise pandemic. How can you have no doubt that there will be a surprise? It's a contradiction in terms. Just another little bit about Anthony Fauci before we move on. He was at the Bill and Melinda Gates Global Grand Challenges Scientific Board. He was on their board from 2003 to 2010, directly for Bill and Melinda Gates, for 7 years. That was a little while back, but they obviously have a tight relationship. And we find along the way that in addition to Victor Zhao, we also have Anthony Fauci as a board member of this organization.